Labas vakaras. Unfortunately, this is all I can say in Lithuanian. So labas vakaras, everyone. Thank you so much for coming in such a great number. My name is Agnieszka Olszewska-Guizzo, and I'm originally from Poland. But today I came all the way from another side of Europe, from Portugal, Porto, where I live. I am actually very excited to be here today. I rediscovered recently that I have a direct maternal lineage related to Vilnius. My great-great-grandmother was born and raised in the area, so I feel even more happy that this is the opportunity. That's the first time I come to visit Vilnius and Lithuania, because it's my first time in this country. So also thank you very much to the organizers of the event, to Urte and Evelina, for this amazing opportunity to share my research and my knowledge behind what's the topic for today. Can landscapes be healing? So, without further ado, can landscapes be healing? So, we will try to answer this question today. But before, some little background, as Evelina already mentioned, I am a landscape architect. I did a PhD in landscape architecture and urban ecology. But for quite a lot of years, I've been a researcher, and I incorporated a lot of the neuroscience methods to investigate the impacts of the landscapes, living environments on our mental health and well-being. And quite recently, I am very happy to come back more to the design disciplines. I'm teaching biophilic design. I am also happy that I'm presenting today in the National Art Gallery, which is sort of a comeback to the art, which I now approach with another perspective, another point of view, coming from all these years, spending all these years in the neuroscience lab. So my talk today is gonna be about that particular question: can landscapes be healing? And obviously the answer is no. I was just kidding. Obviously the answer is yes, and I think all of you came here expecting that this is gonna be an answer to the question. But of course we will dive a little bit deeper than just a simple answer to it. And there is a lot to unpack. What kind of landscapes can be healing? How do we know they are healing? They are healing, but for what specifically? Why do we call them healing? And can we, as designers, as urban planners, as architects, incorporate and replicate these healing landscapes in many different contexts and different situations? So I hope you will find something interesting in my presentation, in my talk. I would just like to understand more about the audience today. So maybe how many people, how many of you represent or have something to do with the practice of architecture? Please raise your hands. Okay, I can see that a lot of you. Landscape architecture? Anyone? Okay, perfect. Urban planning and design? Okay, thank you. And people who don't have any background or anything to do with actually the practice of design, and they are just interested in the healing. Okay, great, that's great. Thank you guys for coming, because not often I have the opportunity to speak with non-designers, and we always complain we are preaching to those who are already converted. So I really appreciate you coming in such big numbers and representing so many different disciplines, so I hope we'll have also quite stimulating discussion in the end. So I will start with setting a stage around the nature and cities, the topic that we already know quite a lot about, and how they impact mental health and our general well-being. This will point me to discussing about what are the contemplative landscapes and what's their impact on mental health, and what is the contemplative landscape model, the tool that I have developed and worked on. And that will lead us to discovering some more background and scientific evidence behind the contemplative landscape model, which in short is CLM. And I will also talk to you about the 7 key components of CLM, and these are the very technical features that you can find in many spaces and apply to design as well. So, our connection to nature runs quite deep, and throughout the history we as humans have sought the solace and the rejuvenation in natural environments. And this is where the biophilia concept comes from, which refers to our inherent, innate affiliation with all the living organisms. And this is something that all humans share. Just because we evolved in natural environments, and for a large majority of our evolution we've been exposed to what is called nature. This is something that we respond very strongly to. Only in quite recent history of humanity we evolved to be so-called Homo urbanicus, and we started to live in this abstract environments that we call cities, and we move there. We move all our lives to cities, and continuously, gradually, we are becoming very urbanized population, just generally speaking in the context of all planet. So the cities that we created from the standpoint of mental health and well-being, they are not really serve us that well, as it turns out. Cities are placed and replacing the natural ecosystems, natural habitats, that causes the eradication of these natural ecosystems or highly transformed natural habitats. The city's character is marked by all sorts of pollution. The cities are full of the static or dynamic elements that are mostly abstract forms, mostly not appearing in nature, just because of efficiency, just because of our history with the Euclidean geometry. There is a lot of stimulations, a lot of stimuli, a lot of elements that our brains and our cognitions is constantly processing when we are in the urban environments. So maximizing that density of information might also be causing the mental strain and mental load. But in generally, taking all these things together, in terms of sensory experiences and what we can find in city environments are not great for our mental health. And this is also not the reason, not the main goal why cities were designed. Nobody was thinking or considering mental health when designing cities and our built environment in general. So actually we already know, and this is a scientific consensus, that the urban environment and just in general urbanicity increases the risk of mental health diseases by 40% as compared to living in the rural areas or anywhere outside the city. So 40% more risk of developing a mental health disease just because of living in the city. This is the result of the meta-analysis that means that these are results from many countries around the world, and this forms our scientific consensus. So it seems that something is inherently wrong with how we design the cities. They are not serving our mental health and well-being, and there is something about how they're designed, how we interact with them. So some things that urban planners, architects, landscape architects could potentially take care of. So we also know from all the environmental psychology research that the solution is in nature, right? The nature is promoted as good. Some of you probably know the most important studies about attention restoration theory and stress reduction theory, all studies that compare urban spaces with natural spaces. But what was quite striking to me was, what is this kind of nature that is a solution, and why would it be solution? And the fact that people and researchers started promoting the nature as a solution to mental health issues in cities was never quite a satisfactory answer for me as a landscape architect. For example, would this landscape that you can see on the slide, would that be healing? And if it would be healing, then how do we know which parts of this landscape are the most important for it to be healing? Which elements and ingredients of this landscape? Is it about the water? Maybe it's about the shape of the skyline. Maybe it is about the vegetation. Can this landscape be replicated in the urban environment? Probably not, because it's too vast. But if we would know what makes this landscape healing, if it is healing, maybe we could replicate at least some aspects of it to make our living environments better, more suitable for mental health benefits. So this is basically all my reflections before coming up with the contemplative landscapes concept. And these landscapes, the contemplative landscapes, are the landscapes that, through just passive exposure to them, and that was my initial hypothesis, that there are some landscapes, some spaces, or scenes, if you will, that just by passive exposure to them, just by looking passively without really doing any activity, trigger in our brains, in our body, the mental health benefits. So the response that is associated with some sort of benefits to our mental health and well-being. And these benefits, it would be good if they are also those benefits that we specifically look for in the urban populations and what they are struggling with. So then one might ask how to find which landscapes are contemplative and which are not, and where is the line, where is the tipping point? How many landscapes we can classify as contemplative, and what are those landscapes that either don't have any effect or deteriorate our mental health? So this is when I started operationalizing the concept of contemplative landscapes and came up with the contemplative landscape model. So this is it. This is the contemplative landscape model. I attach here the QR code, which I am not sure if it works, so please check when I checked on the smaller screen, it didn't work, but we will be able to fix it. So this is a contemplative landscape model. I created it. It was first introduced in 2016, so it has a couple of years. Throughout this time, it was refined and validated. And I also wrote a book about it, about explaining all of different aspects of the contemplative landscape model. What it was based on is the design theory and very, let's say, artsy concepts. To some scientists may be calling it too vague to be operationalized and like put in the quantitative frame. But I still gave it a try, and I still tried to dissect the landscapes and take from the landscapes, from the scenes that we are surrounded with, take all the ingredients that could potentially influence our mental health and well-being and the brain response. And I found 7 categories of these ingredients, which are the landscape layers, landform, biodiversity, color and light, compatibility, archetypal elements, and character of peace and silence. So there are 7 key components, each of which can be scored from 1 to 6 points, mainly based on how much of these things, of these ingredients exists in the perceived and evaluated scene. And then when we have the scores from each category, we can easily compute the average contemplative landscape score for each scene. When we go around the whole site, like a bigger park, and evaluate the most relevant, more significant scenes around the whole park, we can then come up with the contemplative score for the entire park. And when we put it on the map or GIS, we can create a heat map of places where the places that have the most potential and the lowest potential to induce this certain patterns of brain activity. So I already mentioned this model can be applied to the single scenes, but also entire area. It can be applied in the rural or urban spaces as well. And what it does, it is predicting with quite an accurate level the pattern of relaxation, stress reduction, mindfulness, and positive emotions in most people. Of course, not everyone, because we don't know about anyone's individual preferences and ways of perceiving the world. But for most people, this is the average and generalizable for all majority of people. So the landscapes that are scoring more than 4.33, and that's also in that sheet that is printable, the interpretation of scores, landscapes that score more than 4.33 turned out to be coined as the most contemplative, and they are characterized by distinct neuropsychophysiological signature that is different from other scenes that are scored lower in that scale. Even though they might be green, they might look nice, they might be fun to go, but because they don't have this specific components, I suppose, they do not induce this sort of brain pattern in our brains. So this model was described and validated in many different scenarios, in many different places, and rounds of neuroscience experiments were run to validate the scores and to refine the model. So here, few words about the neuroscience background behind the CLM, but I'm not actually going to spend too much time on it, just briefly mention main results and how we arrived to them, because actually majority is written in the scientific papers, which I refer you to for those who want to have more insight in all the method behind it. And there is quite a number of papers about contemplative landscape model. So in the experiments, we compared those highly contemplative, above the score, above the threshold landscapes, with less contemplative or non-contemplative landscapes. We also used the control environment, which was the environment completely devoid of any natural elements, sometimes not even sky, so it was a completely concrete, busy urban environment. We recruited adults only, so no idea what works for children, actually. We had healthy sample and also patients, which was quite interesting because we could see how contemplative landscapes work. Are they working differently for the patients suffering with major depressive disorder? And what is their perception on the brain level of these spaces? The experiments were conducted in Europe, Portugal, and Asia. This particular picture is from Singapore, from the study that I conducted between 2018 and 2021, where we used the EEG and FNIRS devices. So EEG, electroencephalography, recording the electrical brain signal, and FNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy, that records the levels of blood oxidation and how the blood changes color with oxygen. We can scan and record this physiological mechanism. We also collected other measurements, not to be only reliant on the neuroscience part, such as self-reports on mood, preferences, severity of depression, environmental confounders also, as well as we conducted the studies outdoors as well, where it's really changing environment, so we were taking also environmental metrics. The experiments were both in the lab environment, which is controlled, and many, like in the neuroscience and medical community, they're not ready to step out from the lab. It has to be controlled environment. But also we tried to replicate the controlled lab environment in the real site, as you can see on this picture. So what we found, for example, here is one of the graphics, one of the figures, that for the patients with depression, highly contemplative, only during the exposure to the highly contemplative landscapes, that is represented in the picture 1, patients showed the clear frontal alpha asymmetry, which is more alpha on the right frontal lobe than as compared to the left, which is a pattern very desirable in the patients, with the depressed patient. It means that the treatment starts working. It means that the patient is on the way to recovery. While normally they show quite the opposite pattern. That was aligning with the patterns of the oxyhemoglobin, which you can see in the lower chart, in the therapeutic garden, which was highly contemplative exposure. We could see the patient's oxyhemoglobin, so the level of how the brain was active, was significantly lower than when compared to the urban busy environment. That means that they didn't have as much of cognitive strain and they were much more relaxed. So putting all these things together with the self-reports, we concluded the therapeutic landscapes, the contemplative landscapes, were very promising as a support for the treatment and very promising for next possible research, something to explore for researcher. And they have a very specific signature that is not just, it is not coming just from the fact that the space is green, because the other condition under the second picture is a, I call it generic green space, a green rooftop. It's a residential area. So the main findings, so here you can see some of the mood disturbance and mood improvement benefits for the general public, and also the FNIRS for the general public. The main findings pretty much confirmed that the contemplative landscapes, those highly contemplative, are characterized by the very distinct neuroscientific signature that is statistically different from the other patterns of brain activity when exposed to other spaces, even those that are green and potentially healing and have some nature, right? The highly contemplative landscapes cause the improved mood and positive emotions. So not only correlated with, like many studies show, but they are actually causing, because it was a before and after experiment isolating the experience from all the other stimulation. We also found that there is a stronger benefits for the vulnerable groups, and it sort of worked like some kind of compensation mechanism, almost as if the nature knows who needs the most of it, most of these benefits, and is trying to give it, even if the person is not aware of that they need it. And then high CLM scores predicted the increased frontal alpha oscillations that are associated with relaxation, and theta oscillations, also in the frontal part of the brain, which is associated with mindfulness state. So these neuroscientific findings are quite important for our understanding of the human and nature connection. And by knowing how to design the spaces, so going back to what these spaces that induced these patterns look like and what elements they contain, we can then try to design better spaces, potentially healing spaces and healing landscapes. So the next part of presentation is going to be more towards art and design. What makes those landscapes contemplative and highly contemplative? Starting from the tranquility and the first very important key component of contemplative landscape, character of peace and silence. So imagine a space where the sound of traffic fade away, it is replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves or the soft lapping of water. So finding this kind of spaces within the city is quite rare. It provides contrast to the urban chaos and overstimulation that we might experience. All sorts of design activities, because we are talking about built environments, such as buffering the noise, proper zoning and programming of the space, introducing the comfortable seating areas that invite for rest and relaxation, creating the visual enclosure from the hustling and bustling city, eliminating the chaos, the noise, and giving the user, the visitor, a sense of solitude, even if we can't achieve the proper solitude. Sometimes it's difficult in the crowded urban environments. there are strategies that provide the sense of solitude. Also, turns out the feeling of safety and no technology or no visible surveillance systems and technology, antennas and stuff like that could potentially improve that character of peace and silence that we can find in highly contemplative landscapes. Going further, we've got the landscape layers. When the elements within the landscapes are harmonizing and flow visually one into another, then the sense of the visual coherence emerges, and we have a feeling that everything just fits together. And this compatibility, sense of compatibility of space, and also creation of the layered landscapes, which is mainly about the depth of the view, is very precious for specifically urban environments and population living in urban environments. So the layers of the landscapes are all about the, as I said, the depth and the visibility of the three distinctive distance zones, so the fore, middle, and background. Our eyes can then expand, and we can see things that are very far away, blurred out, without seeing the detail, and so we see them in a compound, in a mass. At the same time, we see things that are closer to us in the foreground, so we can, in a way, psychologically distance ourselves from what is very far away. That creates some sort of psychological distance to all sorts of things that might be bothering us. And it's called the comfort of long-distance views. The attention restoration theory likes to call it being away, feeling of being away as one of the main principles of attention restoration. So yeah, the long-distance views that can be quite scarce in the compact urban environments are very precious, and one of the very, I would say, very straightforward component of the contemplative landscapes. What is compatibility all about is probably very familiar to all people that are dealing with design, with art. It's all about the balance, spatial harmony, spatial order, lack of disturbing elements, lack of clutter, this outside silence and sort of reductionism, especially when talking about urban space, induces the inner silence and psychological introvertism. So only then the users can start focusing on their inward journey, let's say, and that eliminates the mental fatigue. And this is the justification and principle why this pattern, this guideline appeared in many different literature references, and then was confirmed with neuroscience that it actually works. Here in the compatibility, it's like the whole long chapter in my book about compatibility, but it's also about the harmony on the top here, the harmony between the natural and man-made, because there can't be too much of any of these sorts. If it's too wild, we won't feel secure and comfortable. Then if it's too built up, too man-made, then it is not going to provide us the restorative experience. Going further, I want to spend too much time on these. Biodiversity and embracing natural forms. This is something that probably a lot of you thought it would be the first thing. When we talk about nature, this would be all about biodiversity, but actually is only one element of 7 that make contemplative landscape a highly contemplative one. So going back to our biophilia that we share among all of us, as long as we're humans, it seems that incorporating the biodiversity and richness in plants and animal species, and also emphasizing the changes and the dynamic character of nature. For example, making visible the passage of the sun on the sky, because the sun is every day moving through the same trajectory above our heads, but we just don't notice it. So just noticing the sun or sun's shadows, objects, shadows moving, casted on the ground is one way to contemplate the natural cycles, the diurnal cycles. We also have a lot of history and cultural references about contemplation of seasonal changes. For example, in Japanese Zen gardens, they really, really appreciated any seasonal changes in plants. And basically cherishing through design everything that is alive, that is changing their forms, colors, moving. This can be plants moving or growing or flowering, or birds or flies, butterflies, or bigger animals, although these ones sometimes are problematic to introduce in the cities. So the landform, on the other hand, is also connecting us with biophilia, and here all sorts of landform and natural topography is very valuable for this contemplative character of space. All sorts of natural lines connect us to biophilia. That also is reflected in the skyline. That should be diversified. That should make us look towards the sky. We actually don't look up to the sky enough, but it's our immediate nature element that is available even in the most compact city, as long as we are outdoors, or should be, I guess. So all the elements that shift our attention towards the sky could be very good example of like landform manipulation and design. There is much more to that. Another trick is water mirror, because water is reflecting the sky, and if water is not moving, then we can see the sky without even raising our head up. A calming color palette and the skillful use of light and shadow can create a sense of tranquility and visual interest. And also, the archetypal elements is a very important and often overlooked group of design strategies or features of contemplative landscapes that bring us back to our collective unconscious. Because archetypal elements are those elements that we respond to strongly through our collective human history. And they are elements such as water and all forms of water, still or running. For example, path and clearing are also very strongly rooted in our collective psyche elements. Forest, the mountaintop or hill, old single tree, stone, a circle, and there are more, but these are the most prominent found in natural landscapes that I think are quite interesting to pay attention to when designing contemplative landscapes. About colors, it tends to be the colors that are not very saturated, the colors that can be found in nature, the natural colors that are not jumping at us, screaming for attention. So, for example, the Frederick Law Olmsted, when talking about healing landscapes and healing nature, he used to refer to the horticulture exhibition, how this would impact us, how we would perceive the horticultural exhibition with plenty of very attractive forms and plants and flowers, exotic forms, versus just like a meadow that is nearby. So he claimed the meadow would have more benefits to mental health than buying a ticket to horticulture exhibition and admiring all these shapes and colors that are foreign, that are not, that are attracting our attention. Even though the horticulture exhibition will be the go-to place and probably most preferred place by most people. So yeah, with this I wanted to end the part about 7 key components. This is really just very brief, going through all 7, but there is really much more with references and with proper justification in my papers and in the book. I would like to say a few words about the application of CLM in health promotion, which was already done in 2 contexts. So first, and also to give you the perspective of how it can be applied and what can be done with CLM on the larger scale, outside of actually design studios only and small scale approaches. So Singapore applied the CLM into the design of the network of their 30 new therapeutic gardens that are publicly available to residents, scattered across all the city-state, and incorporated CLM as a guidelines for their designers. Sweden recently incorporated the CLM in their NUR program, Nature Rehabilitation Program in the Skåne region, where they use it for the assessment. So Singapore more for design and creation of new spaces, Sweden more for the assessment of the rural properties which are to provide the nature rehabilitation program to the people that got prescription for their burnout and exhaustion and other, there is a whole list of the disorders they're suffering with. They get prescription and they go to these rural properties to get their treatment. But in order to select those properties from others, they incorporated the CLM as a quantitative tool. And here on this picture, you can see some fieldworks with students and with people from the SLU, as well as Neurolandscape, my NGO, to assess to give a first round of trials for assessment of the properties that are rural properties, so they're quite non-urban space as well. So, coming back to the initial question, so yes, landscapes can be healing. It is proven with science. And what is healing about them is pretty much the fact that they influence just by passive observation, just through the passive exposure to them, without any guide, without any instruction, without us even noticing many times. They can alter by quite a bit our brain activity patterns. Not all of them can do that, but we can identify them with the attempts such as CLM. We can try to identify those who have the highest potential for giving that beneficial effect. To recap, and that's my final slide, and point out some takeaways from today. First thing and foremost, I want to stress out, and I always say that not all nature is equal, and nature is such a vast, broad term that even environmental psychologists cannot really name what nature is or what landscapes are and what green spaces is. I literally at every specialized conference, this is one of the debates I'm hearing, what is nature or what is landscape? And it always changes. And for each research project, there is another definition they stick to and another new one that they come up with. So for what we know for sure, not all nature is equal. Then I would like to emphasize the importance of the human perspective in design. The design of living spaces, so the spaces we live in and people actually live in and interact on the daily basis, should be designed with them in mind. And it should be recognized that people interact with them from the point of view, from their senses, what they see, what they hear, that is then processed by their brain. So this is a valuable input, data input that actually neuroscience can give to us designers. And in my view, if we are to base the design on anything, it should be science, and more specifically neuroscience, as opposed to what we might have been doing for quite a long time, basing designs on trends, historic styles, our preferences, aesthetics, and so on. So understanding how the brain responds to different environmental stimuli can inform the design process, and there is still a lot to learn about that. And we are just in the beginning of starting to understand, but already with the amount of information that is out there accessible for designers, I tend to say it's becoming irresponsible not to apply the research that is out there in the design that ultimately will be for people. And that has to do a lot with the interdisciplinary and holistic approach, inviting different disciplines to dialogue. This is something that we have been hearing for a while already. It's nothing new, interdisciplinary approach. But to be really interdisciplinary, we need to get to really fine level of details about the design, and I feel this is only the beginning of that journey. And finally, as the winter approaches and the days are getting longer, nights are getting longer, days are getting darker, I want to end. I think this picture is upside down for some reason. Sorry, it was supposed to be opposite way. I don't know what happened. Maybe that's a good twisted point at the end of my presentation. So yeah, let's remember, maybe that slide will make us remember it more, to nurture our mental health and try to seek out those even unconscious but still benefits that the healing landscapes and contact with nature and specific aspects of nature can provide us. And the contemplative landscape model can be a powerful tool. You can use it in your design practice, you can use it in your everyday life as well. I just have to make sure you get the printable version link. So yeah, this is it. Thank you very much. I will be happy to answer any questions or comments that you would have. This is also my book, Neuroscience for Designing Green Spaces, Contemplative Landscapes, in which I really profoundly explain each and every little ingredient under each of the key components, and also much more about scientific part is explained. So thank you very much one more time.